We already saw what happened in that last live, and there's no need to look for far-fetched theories or make up excuses for what we saw, because it was quite clear. Jungkook and Taeyoung were together. They showed themselves as always, comfortable, attentive to each other, and that connection they have was noticeable again without them making any effort to hide it. There were no filters or distance, just the two of them sharing a space as they have done so many times, with gestures that have been repeated for years. As expected, some people were upset again, that they seemed too close, that they were pretending, that it was all part of a show. The truth is that neither comments nor criticism can change what they showed with total naturalness. When they were together, there was a different energy. Taeyoung never stopped looking for Jungkook. Every time he had the chance, he touched him as if it were something habitual, something he does without thinking. Sometimes to the face, as he's always liked to do. And Jungkook not only allowed it, but accepted it with a calmness that speaks for itself. On several occasions, he was even the one who approached, seeking that physical contact with gentle gestures, short hugs, close encounters, those glances they only share between them. The most interesting thing is that these gestures don't just appear once and for all. They're always there. The location changes, the context changes, but the way they interact remains the same. They seek each other out with their eyes, they settle into each other's space without invading it. It's something that doesn't have to be shouted to be understood. Despite everything they've tried to do to keep them apart, both inside and outside the company, when they're together they can't help but return to that way of being that is so typical of them. Sometimes they hold back, but when they feel comfortable, like in that live show, everything flows. And it's not because they're trying to show anything, but because that's how they are when they feel safe with each other. Jungkook, for example, had that same playful attitude that appears almost exclusively when he's with Taeyoung. It's not just about smiling, but about how his tone changes, how he lets his guard down. And Taeyoung was different too. More relaxed, with that way of approaching without fear, of touching Jungkook as if he were his safe space. There's something that has always been constant between them, the way they repeat gestures. Touching each other's faces, leaning into each other, sharing very close spaces without it seeming awkward or forced. These are patterns they've seen for years and that return every time they meet again. Many people still try to deny it, but the truth is that their relationship doesn't need words to be understood. Their actions speak for themselves. They are together, they understand each other, and they care for each other. If it were just friendship, there wouldn't be so much emotional coherence between them. What they show is something built over time, with trust and mutual affection. Even when they're not speaking directly, their bodies are oriented towards each other. There's not a single moment when they're distracted or absent. They constantly pay attention to each other. And it's true that there are other members with whom they also share jokes or moments, but with Taekook there is a difference. It's a much more intimate connection, much more subtle, but at the same time more evident. In that live it was more noticeable than ever, from the way they sat, to the way they reacted to the things the other said. It was something authentic, Jungkook leaning his head slightly, Taeyoung adjusting his position to keep him close, those little things that are not rehearsed. I know you've noticed too. Every time we see Taeyoung and Jungkook together, something happens. It's not just that they look at each other differently, it's the way they understand each other without speaking. It doesn't matter if they don't say anything directly, because what's between them always ends up coming to light, even if it's in the details. Every time they're together, you feel that connection, and it's not a theory. It's something we see all the time. They feel comfortable and calm, as if being next to each other was the most natural thing in the world. And it is. Because theirs has always been like this, just the two of them being who they are. The interesting thing is that sometimes they seem to take great care not to show everything, but other times they leave little clues that say more than any public statement. Do you remember when Jungkook's secret Instagram account came to light? Nobody knew it was his. And suddenly he decides to share it himself. Why? To do a live with Taeyoung, just to spend a moment with his partner in front of those who follow them. He did it because he felt like it, because at that moment he didn't care if it was an account he'd kept private. The important thing was to share that time with Taeyoung, and that says something. And that wasn't the only time. Remember at the restaurant in Malibu? Several people said they saw them there. No clear images were leaked. But then, Jungkook let it slip in a live with Jimin. He didn't say it outright, but he hinted at it in that way he always ends up confirming without confirming. It's as if they were saying, yes, we were there, but we don't need to show everything. And the truth is, they don't need to. They keep a lot to themselves, and that's totally valid. But when they feel the moment is right, they share it calmly, without explanations. They just show it like someone sharing a little piece of something they cherish. There was also a time when many thought they were estranged. They weren't seen together, there were no visible interactions, and you know how it is, people start assuming things. And suddenly, Jungkook appears on a live stream and says he'd been training with Taeyoung for 2.5 months. No one expected it. There were no photos, no stories, no videos. And yet, there they were, together, sharing their daily lives as always. Because that's another important thing, their relationship doesn't depend on showing off. They're together even when no one is watching. And that, in a relationship, speaks louder than any public gesture. Sometimes people expect them to say everything with words, but what they do is more subtle. It's gestures, glances, decisions like appearing together in small moments or leaving clues that only those who follow them closely can notice. It's not marketing, it's not acting. It's simply how they live their relationship. Not everything is meant to be shown, but what they let on is always intentional. And when they do, it's enough to remind us that they're still there, sharing their space, their time, and many other things we probably don't know. And that's what I respect most about them. They don't need to constantly say they're together. It shows in how they act, how they look at each other, how they give each other their space. Taeyoung and Jungkook have built their relationship at their own pace, with their own rules, and although they keep many moments to themselves, the ones they share tell us much more than meets the eye. It's not a story you shout, it's a story you live. Taeyoung and Jungkook don't need to speak to make themselves understood. Their language is different. In many of the recorded moments, you can see how their bodies connect naturally. If one gets closer, the other adapts to the space without colliding, without a doubt. When one touches, the other reacts without hesitation, as if they were waiting for it. These actions aren't coincidental. Nor are they made for a camera. They are real moments that feel too natural to have been planned. People often want explanations. They expect everything to be said with words. But in the case of Taeyoung and Jungkook, words are unnecessary. What they express happens in the silences, in the small gestures that only a few notice. The glances that last a little longer than usual, the impulse to touch without hesitation, the way they seek each other out without having to look around. This isn't marketing. It's not acting. It's a unique way of being present for each other. Watching them, you understand that they live their relationship privately, but never hidden. They leave clues. They share tiny, sometimes barely visible details that mean a lot to Taeyoung fans. The important thing isn't how much they show, but what's conveyed when they do. And although many don't understand it, there's something very strong between them, mutual respect, constant attention, and care for what they've built together. Sometimes, They're surrounded by many people, but you only have to see how they act around each other to notice that their focus is on each other. And that can't be faked. They don't seek attention. They don't force what they do. What we see happens because that's how they are when they're together. They're not trying to convince us of anything. They just live like that. Every decision they make, like appearing together in small moments or sharing certain gestures, has a value that goes beyond their public image. This isn't a story told with words. It's a story lived with actions. And every action, no matter how small, has weight. In Taeyoung and Jungkook's world, silences also speak volumes. And that's what gives their relationship a strength that goes beyond the obvious. There's something very clear when you observe Taeyoung and Jungkook at different moments. What they show isn't casual, nor is it part of a script designed to attract attention. It's true that many people doubt and think that everything that happens between them is part of fan service. But the difference between something planned and something real can be noticed just by looking closely. Taeyoung and Jungkookers have learned to read those signs. They understand when a gesture has true intention. Taeyoung and Jungkook don't behave as if they're putting on a show. They don't need to. They act naturally, as if they were alone, even when there are hundreds of eyes watching. There's no exaggeration. There are no forced movements. They just feel comfortable with each other. And that says more than any statement. When they're together, everything seems calmer. They don't need to talk all the time or prove it with words. Actions are enough. The way they look at each other, the way they walk together, how they stand close even when there's no need. All of these things can't be rehearsed. They're real responses that come from the bond you've built. And that bond has its own rhythm.